Hello and welcome to the shop. I'm Jared and this is the Questionable Garage, and today we're doing one of my favorite episodes to kind of do. We're talking about tools and how to get rust and paint off of cars and parts that you're working on. Now, it's no surprise, we've got lots of projects around the shop and a lot of them are rusty. And while a lot of them do keep a little bit of a patina look, try hard, Johnny Rev, some of them are meant to look really pretty and eventually get a nice paint job, and that is gonna require a lot of paint and a lot of rust removal. And since I know you guys are just as sick as I am at home, you like to work on old stuff. So we're gonna kind of go through all of the methods that I've personally used or some that I know about using some footage from some friends, and we're gonna kind of devise what is the best method for getting that rust and gunk off of your project and ready for some paint or coatings. So as you can see on the table, we've got a small myriad of tools that we're gonna kind of go through, and actually we're gonna use pretty much all of them. We either already have or we're going to on some old panels, so it's as real of a discussion as possible. It's just not me, pontificating about what I think something will do. We're gonna use them. And then we are also gonna kind of devise a fun little chart where we break down the effectiveness, the cost, where something's gonna be good or not good at, so it's an easy reference for you. Now, when we're talking about rust removal, there's kind of a couple different categories. We're gonna break things down into a blasting category, a mechanical removing category, which technically, I guess, blasting fits into, but we're gonna break those apart into two different things. We're gonna go with some high-tech rust removal, and then we're gonna go with some chemical rust removal. Now, the first thing we're gonna go over, you guys have used it a ton, I've used it a ton. A trusty wire wheel. You slap them onto a grinder, you slap them into a drill, and you go to town. Stripping away rust, gunk, grime. This type of wire wheel on here right now, this is a tight wound wire wheel. Really good on heavy gunk on frames. You can hit paint with it, but you do have to be a little bit careful because this does not give, and as it's spinning and impacting, you can run into damaging paint a little bit. Also, the really tight round ones work really good, again, removing heavy gunk, but if you get your hand caught into it, it's a little less forgiving than, let's say, one of these soft wire cups, some of the finer wire wheel, where this is not gonna cut into the gunk as good, and they tend to fling off a whole lot more. You're gonna find them in your clothes a little bit later. They all have a good application. So if you're doing a light removal, anything like that, this wire wheel comes in really good. Wire wheels are also really versatile because you can put them in the drill and get into really small, tight, specific areas. So you're paying generally a couple bucks per wheel and you go a long time with it. We're also gonna interject right here, safety. So a lot of people like to wear gloves with wire wheels. I'm in the camp that I don't necessarily love a glove because they tend, especially with this style, if you get your finger in it, it's gonna grab, it's gonna wind up, and it likely is gonna do a little bit more damage than quickly bouncing off your hand. It all comes down to making sure you're using the tool as safe as possible. Also, with just about everything on the table, you need to put on some safety glasses, and if you're knocking up a lot of dust, wear a respirator. It's gonna make you feel a whole lot better, and some of the stuff later on down the line, if you don't do it right, you do run the risk of permanent bodily harm. So good safety glasses, good respirator, a full face mask, be smart. When it comes to wire wheels, gloves are up to you. Now also, with this same tool, you can use more than just wire wheels. You can bust out a good trusty flap disc. Now these are basically small bits of sandpaper lined up. This is generally more used for removing lots of material, but you can, with a steady hand, use it to cut away rust, prep something for welding, or get some paint and rust off a body panel. But this is a much more aggressive use case. You gotta be careful with it because you will cut too much of your panel out. It works. I used it successfully, so I figured we'd mention it. Now these do get a little bit more expensive. You're into the $7 to $8 a piece, but they do work really well. Also, you've got your heavy duty sanding discs that also go on our friend, the grinder here. A very versatile tool, less aggressive than a flat disc, available in lots of different grits, so you're able to pair it with heavy rust removal, metal prep, or paint removal. So again, affordable, and it goes along with your angle grinder there. The angle grinder kind of comes in as one of the most versatile tools. Also in our mechanical removal, you got the surface grinder. These are just now finally becoming affordable in the past year or so, so you're seeing them a whole lot more often. This works great for a lot of different things. Like our angle grinders, you can get a lot of different attachments and wheels for it. You can get really fine, you can get really coarse. This is full scale stripping from rusty metal, fresh sheet metal, down to a little bit more on a paint removal wheel. One thing you do run into with this is this tends to leave a much more polished finish, that if you're immediately gonna paint, you actually need some grit and lines in there for the paint to adhere a little bit better. But if you're doing metal fabrication or you're working with raw metal, this thing is an absolute king. The problem, you gotta have a good flat surface. If you're working in any type of compound curves, that's not gonna cut it because it's gotta be flat for it to do its job. But again, comes in medium price point, but it is something that is worth looking at adding to your toolbox, even if you're just doing raw metal fabrication. Mill scale, that thing does great on. Now, the versatile DA sander, dual action sander. You've got different ones with variable speeds. You got any type of sandpaper you will want to put on it, so it's gonna work great for getting paint off, rust off, pretty much anything off. It's gonna do everything. You do it with Bondo. When you're doing the final body work, this comes in strong. Really good units. Like, you want a good sander and good sandpaper, so your initial tool cost ends up being a little bit higher. Your consumables, the better your tool, somehow makes your consumables last a little bit longer. This does a great job, and on paint removal, tends to leave the finish on the metal exactly what you need to start putting new paint on. So, as you can see from the footage, it worked great, did not take a lot of effort, and I didn't have the best sandpaper on it. Now the last, hand sanding. Block sander, just sandpaper in your hand. This is gonna be the slowest, but it works. The one thing you gotta watch for, especially if you're doing body filler, we're talking rust and paint removal. When you have a really small pressure point like your fingers, you're gonna leave lines in the material you're working with, but when you're just doing bulk material removal, getting the rust off, getting the old paint off, your hand works. Your arms, you're gonna bulk up your triceps a whole lot doing this, but it works, and it's the cheapest because all you're using is sandpaper and a couple dollar sanding blocks. So it's out there, for the extra budget strapped, but it's there. All right, well, that's mechanical round 1 done. Kind of mechanical too are the impact and chisels. They kind of get looked over a whole lot, but they do a good job of it. Now, we're in the South, so I don't get to use a needle scaler quite as much. Any of you guys north of the Mason-Dixon line in the Salt Belt know exactly what this thing is. It is basically a air hammer with a bunch of small impact point chisels that works amazing on frames, chassis, subframes, rear axles, anything with heavy duty scale rust. Now on my demonstration, I kind of just get to use it against really old baked on Mopar grease and mud because, well, that's what we get in the South. But for fun, I did try it on a painted panel. It worked. I wouldn't do it because it left the metal underneath in a horrible condition for any type of body work. But this is a really good, effective tool. Depending on how much you use it, you almost never have to replace the needles, so it's kind of a one-time purchase unless you use it regularly. Still, needles aren't very expensive. You're coming in just usually over $100 for the tool. Works great when the application's right. Also, in that chisely hand removal method, you got files. This is a tool that so often gets overlooked in a toolbox, but it works great, again, as long as the panel is relatively flat. You can get grime, scale, paint, metal. It just removes a little bit of everything. Available in all kinds of different shapes and fineness, coarseness. It'll do just about everything, but again, it tends to go on the very slow part because, once again, you're going by hand. It did surprisingly well removing paint on the Jensen hood, but it did clog up. Then you just come back with a stainless steel brush, knocks it out, ready to go. In the chisel scraper department, everyone's favorite. a flathead screwdriver. I know it says it's not a chisel. You've done it, I've done it. They work really, really well depending on what you're trying to remove. And you've also got a carbide scraper. I don't have a flat metal scraper here just because I melted mine last time I was removing undercoating from a wheel well of an old Mopar. Just sometimes you just scrape by hand, and it works really, really well. All right, the blasting methods. This is not a traditional, easy to do at home, but sometimes you can, especially if you've got a blast cabinet. That works great for small parts. You've got full chassis blasting when you're doing sand, when you're doing, you can do metal grit, you can do coal flake. There's lots of different things you can blast when you're doing dry blasting. Works really well, but it makes a tremendous mess as everything just blasts and flies everywhere. You do need to have respirators on for it, and you have to be careful when you're working on especially car chassis, because that impact will start to overheat the metal and you can distort it while you're preparing it for restoration. Now, along with the dry blasting, you can do soda or walnut blasting, where you're actually using baking soda in a very specialized prepared method. I used it some in the blast cabinet when we were doing the water pump restoration. You can do it for very careful metal and paint removal when you're not wanting to necessarily blow a mess everywhere. Easy to clean up because it dissolves with water, and it works really good for spot repairs or delicate material restoration. There's also the vapor blasting. There's some really fancy, expensive vapor blasting cabinets, or what I found on Amazon for $29 is an adapter for my pressure washer. Now, this works really good in certain circumstances. When I first got it, I tried to use my fancy little electric pressure washer, and that just didn't do it. They do tend to rate for 3,000 or greater. You see people selling these kits anywhere, again, from Amazon in the 20s, all the way up to $200 for almost the exact same thing. It works really good when you finally give up and go buy a professional pressure washer, and it cleans everything. If you look at my current state, you may be asking yourself, did we get that little electric, what is it, 2300 PSI working with the vapor blaster? No, it did not, but we did get it working. And we're gonna do more filming results here in a little bit. I was just learning it. I've gone through pretty much one bag. Didn't matter that it was wet or dry, but I mean, look what it did. It's a little tricky though. I'm not sure when Dwayne will insert the footage, maybe right now. Me chasing the little parts around. They tend to get pushed a lot when you're using something with a little bit more power. I love the electric. It's so convenient to just plug in and have a working pressure washer, but we upgraded a lot. I ran and scooped this thing up. I have 4,000 PSI. I don't even know how many horsepower. The first time I kicked it on, it almost ripped the gun out of my hand, so you know it's good. So I think we found our new favorite method. It is a little messy, but nowhere near as bad as dry sandblasting, because if you notice, all of our glass is in one spot, 2 spots, and a little bit easier to manage. Now, one big benefit of it is you're not going to overheat the part because you're mixing it with the water. It also tends to keep dust down because obviously with the moisture, keeps things heavy, puts it immediately on the ground. It doesn't float around as much. But some people claim it's clean. When you're done, you still have your glass, your sand, your Coke, whatever, on the ground. When you're done blasting, you need to make sure to have good glasses on and a respirator because there's still the potential for some vapors floating around. But if you have a good pressure washer, it is an incredibly effective way to get into absolute amazing material and panel preparation, as you can kind of see behind me a little bit. All right, another really good way to get rid of rust is chemical treatment. Now, it comes in so many different ways. You've got your evaporust, muriatic acids, you know, they work in a whole lot of different ways. Evaporust and that style of treatment chemically reacts and kind of converts the rust back into something usable. It's a small miracle, but it is a really cool, affordable way. If I remember, Ed China actually made a custom bathtub and coated a frame in it, soaked a frame in it. Worked really cool. Now, when you're doing spot rust removal, muriatic acid, navel jelly, phospho, those work really good in basically just chemically evaporating the rust. It attacks the rust, and eventually, if you leave it on too long, can also start to attack and react with good metal. So it takes a lot of attention. You need to make sure you're using it correctly. Otherwise, you're gonna ruin the good parts too. Also, in the realm of chemical rust, you have the chemical converters. The Sweet Patina Blackout, Pour 15, the Rust-Oleum, the quick sprays. They work by reacting and creating a hard coating against the rust with the rust and encapsulating it so it can no longer chemically react with air to make more rust. These are relatively simple to do. You knock the big flakes off, wipe it down with degreaser, and coat it and paint it. It gives you a nice hard finish. Now, if you're going to do it on a panel that's gonna see sun, make sure you do a UV treatment because they aren't UV safe. But again, very affordable. We used it a ton on all of our projects. And then the big boy of chemical treatments, and that is full chemical dipping. A lot of you have asked during the processes of the car building why I don't use it. Well, the full initial process generally is about $2,000 or so. The problem you run into is you can't get into all the nooks and crannies to then recoat and retreat that metal to prevent it from rust. You can kind of push wands in, blindly spray, but you can't necessarily fully treat and protect all of the metal you've now fully stripped back to raw, good, clean metal. You can then also have your car re-dipped and treated and essentially galvanized to no longer be capable of rusting. But in these restoration processes, if we do that, half the metal we just spent $3,000 treating and protecting is going to get cut out and replaced. So it has a really good use case. It's just not ever been right for me. It's really cool to watch, but again, it's not a affordable do it at home type of process. All right, our final category, the high-tech specialty. One I really want to do in the shop eventually at some point that I've seen a lot of cool videos is electrolysis, where you basically put a sacrificial piece of metal into a vat of fluid, run an electrical current through your part, and then back to that sacrificial metal, and it pulls the rust out of your part and puts it on the sacrificial electrode. It's a really cool process. Again, you have to be able to submerge the part that you're working with and treating, so it's not a do-all, fit-all, everything, but you probably have just about every part you need to make it work in your workshop. So you run a battery charger, you got, buckets. It may be something fun to set up and just play with a little bit in the garage. And there's lots of really good walkthroughs on how to set it up. So going off the fact you probably have everything in your garage, it's very affordable. And then the latest and greatest big boy, I've got my small rust cleaning wand in hand, the lasers. Laser rust removal is really starting to become a more affordable option. It used to be you were 15 and 20,000 plus. You're seeing them start to break under the $5,000 price point, which again, it's not for everyone, but it's gonna evaporate rust, paint, get you back to a raw, clean metal very easily, but it's not cheap yet. It's getting there. Also, whenever you're using the laser, you have to be very careful in that nobody is in the possible field of view. You have to be aware of how you're standing so you're not getting hit with the radiation of the reflection, and you have to wear the right respirator and eye protection. So, amazing technology, not quite affordable yet, and if you're not careful, you will overheat the panel as you're working because it is using light. It also does not break through scale rust very well. You need to make sure you scrape the big chunks off before you can come back and get a nice, pristine, raw, clean surface. All right, so we've kind of gone over everything that I'm aware of for good, safe rust, paint, panel prep, anything when it comes to getting ready to restore your car. Now, do you have a method you like more? Something I forgot about? Comment below. Also, I made a really handy little chart that Dwayne turned into this amazing screen graphic that's going to show the breakdown of what each method is, its approximate cost, how rough or dangerous it is to the panel, how fast it is, what its best use case is. So looking at that chart, what method do you pick? How do you get the rust off your product at home and get ready for painting and the next step of restoration or restoration? I mean, if we're going this far, we're not doing restorations anymore. We're restoring a few things. Now, personally for me, weighing all the pros and cons, I'm still going to keep all of these in my toolbox. But when it comes to the major rust removal, what am I picking? I'm going with vapor blasting. Maybe here's a fun, messy montage of me cleaning a whole lot of stuff. So at the end of the day, there is a method for every budget. Doesn't matter if you're looking for the high-tech laser or you're scraping by hand with a file. You're going to be able to get your project done, and I really hope this overview of all of the methods is going to help you a little bit. And I'd love, again, your opinion down in the comments. Did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? Go ahead and tell me. I'm Jared, reminding you guys to always make questionable choices, but don't forget your safety gear. You only got one set of eyes. We'll see you next time.